Let me now quickly show you some of the stuff that we just learned in practice. And so let's now build an extremely simple example. So I will start by simply logging test start to the console. Then afterwards, I will create a set timeout with something that will just also log something to the console only. So 0-second timer. And so that's because we will fire this timer after exactly 0 seconds. Okay, so basically this is a timer which should call this timer function exactly after 0 seconds. So what that means is that after 0 seconds, this callback will be put on the callback queue, right? Then next up, let's build a promise that resolves immediately. So this is something that we will learn in the next video actually. And so for now, just follow what I'm writing here. So promise.resolve basically allows us to build a promise, so to create a promise that is immediately resolved. So one that immediately has a success value. And so that fulfilled success value is going to be this one we passed in here. So resolved promise 1. And then we can handle that resolved promise. And so that response, we can then simply log it to the console. So just like in any other promise, we can handle it with the then method. And this callback function here will get called with the resolved value as an argument. And so in this case, the resolved value of that promise is this one here that we just specified. And now just to finish, let's just log another string, test, end. And so for now, that's actually it. So in what order do you think that these 4 messages that we have here will be logged to the console? And I want you to really think about this and maybe even pause the video and write it down. Well, let's think about this together before we actually check out the result. So the first 2 messages that are going to be printed should be pretty obvious. That's because we already know that any top-level code, so code outside of any callback, will run first. And so, of course, the first 2 logs will come from these 2 synchronous console.logs here. But now between the timer and the resolved promise here, it might be a little bit trickier. So both the timer and the promise will finish at the exact same time. So both right after 0 seconds. So the timer, because we told it to finish after 0 seconds, and the promise, because we told it to immediately become resolved, right? And so therefore, they will both finish at the exact same time. So which one do you think will be handled first? Or in other words, which of these 2 callbacks here will be executed first? Well, the timer appears first in the code, and so it kind of finished first, and so its callback will be put on the callback queue first. But does that mean that this callback here will be executed first? Well, actually no, it doesn't. And that's because of the microtasks queue. Remember? So the callback of the resolved promise here, so this one, will be put on the microtasks queue. And this microtasks queue, as you learned in the last video, has priority over the callback queue. And so after this whole code runs, we will have 1 callback in the callback queue and 1 in the microtasks queue. And therefore, the one from the microtasks queue should be executed first. And so therefore, the callback from the microtasks queue should be executed first. And so that's this one here. And therefore, the first message to appear of these 2 should be resolved promise 1. All right. So the order in which they should appear is this, then this, then this, and finally the timer. And so let's now finally confirm this. So I'm saving it. And indeed, that is exactly as expected. And so that's a relief actually. So what I told you in the last lecture is actually true. Now we proved it with code. Now remember that the implication of the fact that microtasks have priority over regular callbacks is that if one of the microtasks takes a long time to run, then the timer will actually be delayed and not run after the 0 seconds that we specified here, right? So instead, it will run a little bit later, just after the microtask is actually done with its work. And so to finish this lecture, let's actually simulate what I just said. So here I will create another promise that will immediately resolve. So let's just say resolved promise 2. And then again, we can handle it here. And then as always, we want to log the result to the console. But before we're doing that, we actually want this callback function to have a really heavy task, which should take a lot of time. And so let's simulate that this callback takes a long time to run by looping over a large number. So we can do the simulation simply with an old school for loop. So let's start with I at 0. And now I will loop all the way until one very large number, let's say this. And I will have to experiment a little bit. And for your computer, it might indeed be different. So if your computer is slower, maybe then you want a smaller number. And maybe it's faster than mine, and then maybe a smaller number will be enough, right? I'm not sure if I said it correctly. So if your computer is slower than mine, then you will need a larger number, right? And so again, this line of code here will simulate that the callback function takes a long time. So really just this microtask takes a long time, all right? It is not the asynchronous task itself. So the promise itself will still be resolved immediately, but then the microtask that it contains, so that it puts on the microtasks queue, that's the one that will take a long time. And so by doing that, I can show you that the callbacks in the callback queue, just like this one here, will indeed be delayed and not run after 0 seconds. So let's try this now. And you see, it took a long time here until this log appeared, right? So maybe we can have even a bigger number. And I hope that my computer is not going to explode with this one. So you see that the page is kind of loading here and it's taking a lot of time. And so actually now eventually it finished, but you see that now only after all this work, the 0-second timer message appeared on the screen. And so this is actual proof that these 0 seconds that we have here are not a guarantee, okay? And that is exactly what I wanted to show you. So this means that you cannot really do high precision things using JavaScript timers. So just keep that in mind whenever you are working with promises. So basically with microtasks and with timers at the same time. Okay, let's just remove this 0 here so that you don't explode your computer, but you still see that the effect is the same. All right, and that's actually enough for this video. I think I proved my point and demonstrated the things that we just learned in the previous lecture. And so now we're ready to go back to some more practical aspects of asynchronous JavaScript. And that will be to create promises from scratch in the next video.